Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voice Like a Lion podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pemberton, and today I'm really excited for this guest because he has helped some of the most amazing people in the sports world and has brought them to life for people like me. So, you're going to get to learn a little bit more about that in just a moment. But this is Andrew Bernstein. He is the multi award winning sports photographer, with one such award being the Kurt Gowdy Media Award by the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. He's also worked with the late Kobe Bryant to help him with his book, The Mamba Mentality, which, if you are a basketball lover like me, you know who Kobe is and you know what that book is. And we just talked about this offline, but he is currently busy with the NBA playoffs and everything that goes with it. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Great to see you, man. Thanks for
And great
having
to
me.
see you. Yeah, I'm
Great.
excited for you to be here because, just like I said in that introduction, you've taken some pictures that have honestly like changed my life. It changed the
Oh,
trajectory of the way that I approach sports. Because for me, I never wanted to play sports. I mean, I'm 6'4", I'm athletic, but I was the introverted kid who wanted to stay in his bedroom and just read books all the time. But then when I
right.
got forced into sports, I hated pretty much every single sport except for one, and that was basketball. And in my day and age, I was growing up, and because I was a nerd, just honestly, I was a nerd. I was writing all the data, all the stats down for every single game. When this time of year came around, I was watching the Pacers play the Pistons and just writing down everything, or the Lakers play whoever they were playing. So
Right.
some of those pictures that you've taken have shaped who I became in playing basketball at all. So I just want to thank you for that before we even dive into it.
No, that's a compliment, man. It flatters me and humbles me a little bit, but also makes me really happy that I can bring some joy into your world with my photos. That's what it's been all about for 4 decades. So, I really appreciate, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so talk to us about that. I mean, 4 decades is a long time. So
hmm
how did you even get into it? Like, why did you decide over 4 decades ago that this was the route that you were going to take?
Well, it started in high school, quite frankly. I was 14 and somewhat creative, curious kid. But things didn't really gel until I got my first camera. My dad bought me a camera on my 14th birthday, actually, and we made a trip that summer to a lot of the national parks in the western United States. And I was able to see for the first time how I could translate things I saw in my head or things I was thinking in through a camera, through a lens onto film, and then learned how to do darkroom techniques from a friend of mine who had a darkroom in his basement, and I became so enamored with photography that the big joke at high school was who would come in the room first, Andy or his camera, because the camera was literally attached to me 24/7. Went to a big high school in Brooklyn, New York. Went to a big university University of Massachusetts. We had a daily newspaper there, and I really got into it. I learned all the techniques of being a photojournalist, taking assignments to all the logistics, to add an assignment, to delivering an assignment. Became assistant photo editor early in my freshman year, basically because no one else wanted to do it. But I was able to start giving out assignments and understood what like managing a staff really involved, which was very fascinating to me. And halfway through my UMass life, I transferred out to college in Pasadena, California, to really up the ante on learning photography. I wasn't really learning much at UMass. I was kind of learning on the fly, but I needed to have some classroom instruction. And through a couple of teachers I had there at Art Center in Pasadena, they introduced me to some Sports Illustrated photographers. And that's where my education really started because I learned on the job. I learned everything from beginning to end on an assignment, how to conduct yourself as a photographer, how to work with other people, how to work especially with athletes and agents, people like that, arena people. And I learned a very specialized technique in how to put these big strobe blast units in the ceilings of arenas. And that's how Sports Illustrated used to light basketball and hockey in those days. And that was a very specialized niche, which when I hung my shingle out to become a professional sports photographer after being an assistant, I had that sort of background of knowing the people I needed to know at the arenas, at the teams, started to meet people on the league level with the NBA. This is the early 80s. And things just sort of took off. I was honestly in the right place at the right time. Showtime Showtime Lakers were taking off like crazy. I became the Dodgers photographer in '84, and haven't looked back since then. This is year 45 that I've actually been in business.
Well, first and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you.
Secondly, the question that immediately comes to mind for me, because I could go a zillion different directions what you just gave me. But
Yeah.
when I think about 45 years in the industry, how, for me, when I think about that longevity, what are some of the things that have been able to give you that kind of longevity? Because I'm sure you've seen tons of photographers come and go over 45 years. So what helped you stand out? What helped you
Hmm.
actually stay? Because I mean, you've had enough success where you could have just said, "Hey, I'm out. I'm retiring. I've been here 45 years. Find
Hmm.
somebody else." But why'd you decide to stay?
Well, yeah, that's a multi-pronged question, my friend. First of all, I've had clients that have been with me since I've been with the LA Kings my entire career. This is 45 years that I've been shooting LA Kings hockey, going back to even before I became a pro. They were the only team in LA that would give me access as a student, and
Wow.
I'll never forget, and always be grateful to them for that. But the bottom line to the whole thing, my friend, is that I found out very early that the way you succeed in this business is you have to have talent. Okay, first of all, but there's a lot of talented sports photographers out there, and we're talking about a very saturated market in LA. Back in those days, there weren't a lot of opportunities for sports photographers, quite honestly, as there are today. So talent is first and foremost, but the thing that is the most important thing to me is that I wanted to know that people wanted to work with me. I wanted to have the kind of personality that gravitated people towards me, that enjoyed working with me, that I knew that would come back again and again and again, because the rest of the story really involves delivering what you're supposed to when you're supposed to, having incredible integrity, instilling trust. I work in a very closed society of professional sports where there's not a lot of margin for trust. I mean, either they trust
Hmm.
you or they don't trust you. And I learned very early that in order to gain that trust, I had to earn it, and then once I earned it, I had to stay there and never give any of my clients or the athletes or the ownership or anyone a reason for ever doubting my integrity. It's kind of a big pie, a big soup of a lot of elements that went into it. And to be successful and to maintain and longevity and have clients keep coming back year after year. And now I have a group of photographers that work under me, and I pride myself in all of us being interchangeable. That if I send a photographer out to do a concert or sporting event or a high level sort of meet and greet with executives, that they're representing me, not just my company, but me. It sort of has to be an
Yeah.
interchangeable operation. So I feel very confident with that. Very, very thankful for the people who work beside me every single day. And the part B of your question is why did I stay there? Because I love it. I have a passion for photography. I have a passion for doing business. Um, I'm sort of weaning myself now off the court and kind of away from my photography business. It's kind of been a slow process, and my clients are very supportive and understanding of that. Still has a ways to go. I still get my juices flowing whenever I go to a game, and I love managing my business and all that. But there'll become a time when I will step off the court, so to speak, and turn the keys over to someone else, or turn the cameras over to someone else, I guess. But I'm not the retiring type, Stephen. So you
Hmm.
brought up the word retiring. You know, I don't want to ever think about myself, out there on a golf course or sailing or basket weaving or any of that stuff. Not to take it away from anybody who loves doing that, but I come from a long line of sort of workaholic and people who worked until the end. My dad worked literally until the week before he died. He knew that he was kind of at the end, but he kept working. He was a doctor. So I have built a couple of businesses they're starting to really gain some traction. My Legends of Sport business is a platform that has really taken a lot of work to get off the ground, to be sort of put a stake in the ground in a very, very busy, competitive sports content landscape. But we found a niche with legendary athletes and moments and teams. And I enjoy doing my podcast. I've done 6 years of the podcast. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but 200 episodes is, a pretty good track record so far. And
Yeah.
we're now getting to the next level with Legends of Sport, doing events and doing podcasting sort of initiatives around the podcast, not just the weekly podcast, but events that encompass the podcast. And I have a whole other business which involves collectibles, which not really ready to discuss yet, but that is also taken up a lot of my bandwidth. So, there's just so many balls I can keep in the air at one time. Luckily, my
Hmm.
photography business sort of runs itself, quite honestly. I have a great office manager named Mary who takes care of the everyday operation, and the photographers are out there doing what they do, and they don't need me over their shoulder. And the clients are happy, and that's really all you can ask for.
Yeah. The legends of sports, we're going to circle back to that because I want to know more about
Hmm.
that. But
Sure.
when I think about going from being a photographer to being over photographers, that's also a transition, even if you didn't transition. So, what
Hmm.
was that like? How did you decide who you were going to hire when you started actually kind of getting yourself out of the weeds and focusing on putting other people in place and empowering them? Because you said
Hmm.
something that speaks to me as you are a good leader, which is
Hmm.
you said that you're it's interchangeable. Like you don't
Hmm.
have to be there, you don't have to look over their shoulders. Anyone can do it, and that means that you're a good leader because you've been able to replicate yourself. So,
Right.
what was that process like for
Well, actually, going back to my college experience, it started then when I was 18 years old. I was assistant photo editor of a major daily college newspaper, giving out assignments to juniors and seniors who were older than me and had been around a long time. I really learned management at that point. I worked under a great photo editor who I love to death, and just one of the great people of all time that I've had the good fortune of being around. And I saw how Chris conducted himself, how he was always respectful of the photographers, but he had a way about him that he expected a lot. He was kind of a little bit on the hands off side, but he always wanted to be involved in the everyday production of the paper. So it became my turn to sort of start assembling a crew or staff. I kind of went back to that model, but I also saw how the photographers that I had worked for as an assistant, how they dealt with their assistants and how they dealt with. I worked for one of my teachers who had a big, very, very productive studio in Hollywood, and very busy all the time. I saw how he conducted himself with everybody from the assistants, the clients, to the vendors, to all the people involved in making his business successful. So I kind of learned by osmosis. Honestly, I wasn't brought up in a business environment. Like I said, my dad was a doctor, but he was a one man band. He didn't have a staff. I wasn't involved. There's no family business to speak of that I was privy to. So I kind of took a little bit from here and there and formed my own way of doing business. And so far, it's proven to work. There's been some bumps along the road. There's been some disappointments along the road. Sometimes you put faith in people and have an emotional attachment to some people who work for you, work under you, that maybe it should just be just business, for example.
hmm
We all get sort of sucked into that every once in a while, I'm sure. And you learn by that. You learn that sometimes you have to sort of be a hard ass in business. Unfortunately, it's your name on the door, not theirs. So I have to always remember that the client always comes first, not us. Client needs something in an hour, we're going to get it done in an hour. Client changes an assignment 5, 6 times, we will adjust without any complaint or anything else. And we go through this on a daily basis, quite frankly. And it's a constant sort of I don't know, reshuffling the deck, but making sure that the client is always taken care
Yeah. And I'm sure that is why your clients have stayed with you, and especially for so long, is because
of.
they know that you're flexible. I
Yeah.
mean, there's not rigidity to it because when you're rigid and it's like, well, our lead times are a week. It's like, well, we
Hmm.
needed this tomorrow, so
Yeah, exactly.
then we're gonna go find somebody else. But when
Right.
it just reminds me because you said something that I think that does happen, but not very many people talk about is having a direct report or having somebody under you or even that are on the same level as you and you just like that you should break ties with them but you don't,
Hmm.
you hold on a little bit too long.
Yeah.
And that's something I don't think you can teach. That you just have to experience it
You have to
because if
experience it. Yeah.
yeah, you got to experience
Absolutely.
it because you sound very much like me where when you get to know and like somebody, the same as you said with people getting to know and like you and trust you, is once they get to know, like, and trust you, it's like, well,
Hmm.
I can help them. I can do this. I can pour more into them, and eventually they'll get better. But unfortunately, that's not everyone's story. Sometimes you got to release them to the marketplace because their story happens somewhere else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're correct on all those fronts. I've probably run the gamut of every success and every disappointment, and at least in my world of professional photography. I've had some clients that haven't lasted that long, but most of my clients have been with me a long time. The ones that we haven't had as much success with, we've learned from. I've learned from.
Mm-hmm.
What didn't we do right? What can we do better next time? How can I put another person in charge of that account who would be more attentive or less sort of needy? You have to have a thick skin when it comes to people working with you and for you. I always like to say that, people work with me because it's really a team effort here. But the bottom line, the check comes from me, and I have to sometimes put my foot down and also understand in my own self that it's a business. It's not really a family, it's a business. And I might care for the people who work with me, which I do deeply. I have a couple of guys who've been with me 25 years. I have one guy's been
Wow.
with me over 30 years, and I owe a lot of my success to him, both of these guys. So, and vice versa. They take care of me, I take care of them. So we're all dependent on each other for success, but we also learn from failure. And
Mm-hmm.
without pointing fingers, without demeaning anyone, we can step back and say, look, this didn't work out the way we wanted it to, or what can we learn to do it better next time? And I think that's across the board in life, but especially in business.
Yeah, no, 100% across the board, especially in business.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a long time for me to figure that out. But you can have the best strategic plan in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You'll like this. One of my favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson, and he says, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face," and that's business. If you can
Right.
have whatever plan you want to, but then when you get punched in
Yeah.
the face with a client coming to you last minute, it's like, "Hey, everything you just did, I don't like it. We need to completely change it." And you go, "Well, that's my best. So what am I supposed to do
Mm.
now?" Or you have
Yeah.
a client that just dips out on you last second, or you have an employee who they steal from you, or something happens, or just
Mm-hmm.
you have a payment processor that breaks down, or whatever happens. There's things, you have a plan in place until you get punched in the face, and after you get punched in the face is where you actually learn, where your character is actually developed. Do you get
Yeah.
back up? Do you stay on the mat? So
Yeah.
that's what it sounds
Yeah.
like happened with you too. And I've heard that story time and time again. That's where the greatest, I mean, even you've been able to work around some of the greatest and work with some of the greatest people in sports. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Bryant, helping him with this book, The Mamba Mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe, we all know Kobe. Kobe, for the most part, he was not going to be off the court unless he
Right.
was like severely injured. And
Yeah.
sometimes he'd still be out there trying to play with a torn Achilles, and it's like, dude. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
the, but that's the kind of person where if you get punched in the face, what are you going to do? And for him,
Yeah.
is he always responded. So
Yeah.
being able to work around those kind of people and work with them, that's where I could see not only are you able to pick up those lessons, but it's able to help you move a little quicker because you've
Mm-hmm.
seeing that's people you work with.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Listen, we've all been knocked down in life and in business. It's how I think Muhammad Ali had that quote about, it's getting up off the mat, and
Hmm.
that's a true test of greatness. We've all seen it. Kobe himself uh, got knocked down a few times and got back up and reinvented himself. And who knew that this guy who blew out his Achilles would be able to come back and drop 60 in his last game, Mamba out, and the whole thing. So
Yeah.
I learned a lot from that as well. I've had some really bad things happen to me in business, honestly. I had a guy that I put a lot of trust in who had one of my major accounts who literally stole the account from me, undercut me. I was very disappointed not only in him, but also in the client, quite frankly. But what I learned from that, I learned that I have to be a little bit more attentive, even to people that I trust. I trusted him 100%. Um, because when the client was seeing him all the time instead of me, maybe something clicked there, and in terms of the relationship, I don't really know. But all I know is that I lost a major client and a major source of income at a time when it was not the best time for that to happen.
Yeah.
So that obviously will never happen again. I've also had the experience of the only time in my career of having to literally fire a client because of the way we were being treated. My photographers were going out to the jobs, and they weren't being treated with respect and professionalism. And I finally had to step in, and it continued. And I said, you know what, guys, I can't allow my people to be in this environment anymore. And that was a tough pill to swallow. Honestly, it was an account that I spent a couple of years cultivating. Finally got the account, and it didn't work out. And I think I was standing up for my people and the integrity of our company by putting my foot down.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have to do that sometimes. Like
Hmm.
that's what people that I talk to who are newer in business, they don't realize that sometimes you got to fire a client, and
Hmm.
sometimes that is the best experience you can have because you get to learn. It's like, why did
Hmm.
that client and I not mesh? Why did
Hmm.
they? Was it them? Was there something I could have done better? Was there something our product or service could have done better? But those stories, and I hear them all the time, but people will cater their entire business around one client, and then eventually that client leaves, and now
Hmm.
you're holding a business that doesn't cater to any other clients. And what
Exactly.
you should have
Yeah.
done was just let that one client go. Yes, you may take a hit to your income. Yes, it may be scary for a little bit, but you'll
Yeah.
have the opportunity to go reach more people, new people that'll
Hmm.
mesh with you who actually love what you do and you get along with really well.
Yeah, for sure. It's all a learning process, my friend. I got to the point in my career where I really needed to pick and choose the type of people I wanted to be around and be around
Yeah.
me, that I wanted to work with and work for. I had that luxury. I think I had earned that by that point, 30 something plus years in. And I'm happy about it. I wasn't happy to lose a client and lose a major source of income, but at the end of the day, you got to feel good about yourself. You got to feel good
Yeah.
about your company and what your company stands for and what that logo on the door really means, right? And I'll give you an example with my podcast. The previous platform we were with would come to me pretty often with some really weird requests for ad reads for companies that I have a very simple requirement. If I'm going to do an ad read or you're going to insert the company's ad into my podcast, I have to either use the product or I have to believe in it or both, right? So these were things that I would never in a million years either put in my body, right, or endorse. And I just would say no. And they say, "What do you mean no? You're like a startup podcast. You can't say no." I said, "Yes, I can." I said, "Because this is, the integrity. It's my integrity at the bottom, at the end of the day. It is the Legends of Sport podcast. But when you go through the weeds and figure out who is Legends of Sport, is me.
Yep.
So I have to feel good about that. And you know what? They respected that, and I appreciate it. And we moved on, and we found middle ground, and that relationship was terrific until it was time for us to move on, and I had that issue again. So that's good.
So talk to me about that. Talk to me about the Legends of Sports. How did you start that? How did you get into that?
Well, it's a great question, my friend. So I have two very, very close friends who were also in the sports business per se. One of them is a major executive at a sports licensing in a sports licensing job. And my other friend, who my kids actually grew up with, neighbor of mine, is a lawyer. He's an entertainment sports lawyer, huge sports fan, of course. And the three of us became very close. And we just came up with this idea about maybe 10 years ago when we were in an event together that there's going to come a time when we're all around the same age where we're going to want to either retire, and none of the three of us were retiring types, or we would want to work together. So the first mandate was we had to find something that we could do to work together, find something in sports because we love sports, and find something that would give back through sports. And by the way, never have to work for anyone ever again because we'll be accountable to each other, but we don't want to be like under anyone else's thumb, so to speak.
Yep.
So that was kind of a daunting sort of marching orders, but we found pretty quickly that we all three of us shared a passion for legendary athletes that we'd all admired, in my case, had photographed or had been around, who had fallen on hard times financially or had issues with, drug addiction or had custody issues or alimony issues or whatever it was, and really had fallen from grace. And like the spotlight that had been on them, shining so brightly, it just moved on. Naturally it would anyway when athletes retire, but had moved on in sort of a way that it was really hard to get it to move back, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted to honor those athletes, wanted to actually help them in some way, sort of regain that sort of iconic stature that they had in the public eye, bring attention back, and then, by the way, figure out how to monetize that, how to get some money in their pockets from the legends that they had been. So that's how Legends of Sport was born. The concept, it morphed over the years a few different ways, and three of us extremely busy in our real jobs, raising families too, and Legends of Sport would get a little traction, and it would back up a little bit, and then got a little more traction. Anyway, I was doing a TV show on the Lakers network, and it was called Through the Lens, and it was me sitting down with a Lakers personality talking about their career through my camera, through my pictures. And a major podcast mogul, guy named Norm Pattis, one of my dearest friends, who unfortunately has passed. Norm started Podcast One, which was probably the second biggest to Apple at the time in podcasts. I didn't know what a podcast was when he approached me. He said, Andy, I love that Lakers show you're doing on TV. I want to put it on my podcast network. I said, but Norm, first of all, tell me what a podcast is, because I think it's like radio, right?
Yeah.
He said, yeah, it's kind of like radio. It's a longer conversation. And I said, but it's audio, right? I mean, like, I'm showing pictures. He goes, Andy, nobody cares about the pictures. They care about the story. They care about the relationship. So he was right, because if people want to see the pictures, they could, go look to my website or go on NBA.com, wherever they wanted to go. But it's really about the stories. And it started the podcast doing audio only, and it was fantastic. Then the pandemic hit, and we figured that, well, we're all stuck in our homes. We might as well start doing stuff on Zoom. And that's where the video portion of the podcast came from. Then I ended up in the NBA bubble for 53 days, and I was doing the podcast twice a week out of the bubble. And Legends of Sport has mushroomed from there. We are involved in a major book project with Vanessa Bryant, Kobe's widow, as kind of a follow-up to the Mamba Mentality book. But this book is something that she wanted to do, documenting the murals of Kobe and Gigi all over the world. So my group is heavily invested in working on that, deep into that project with her. And that book will come out at some point in the summer of 2020. So stay tuned to that. Maybe we can talk again at that point.
I would love to.
And, it's a juggling act, my friend. I mean, just before you and I got on today, we were talking about our content plan for Legends of Sport. 4 events that we have planned for the summer. I had my office manager calling me about coverage of the Kings playoffs that are going on right now. LA Kings, the Clippers, and the Lakers are all home at the same time in the playoffs.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty amazing. So my plate is full, but it's the only way I like it, because I never want to be sitting around thinking about when that phone's going to ring or when I'm going to get, that next job, because I remember what that was like way back in the day when I was a young, struggling photographer. And I'm thankful every single day that I experienced that. I was humbled by that, and I've grown through that.
Wow, that's incredible. I really like that, because you're talking about just having the full plate and remembering where you came from. So just explaining and walking us through what that's like. I mean, because so many of the people that are either listening, pretty much everyone listening, because they're mainly small to medium-sized business owners, they've experienced that at some point in time. I mean, there's people that I've talked to who they've created their own Fortune 500, and that's incredible. But at some point in time, it was not a Fortune 500. So I'm just sitting there listening to you talk about all that, and even the projects that you're working on. It's honestly amazing that you're able to do all of that, and you've done it, like I said earlier, with the longevity and in excellence. So for the people listening, how do they connect with Legends of Sport? Like, if they want to go listen to the podcast, if they want to be involved in it, how do they connect?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. The easiest way, honestly, is just to go to our Instagram, @Legends of Sport. That has links to everything. But if you want to go and see the long form videos or the shorts that we've been posting, it's on our YouTube channel, Legends of Sport. The podcast can be found everywhere. Our home base is iHeart, but you can get us on Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. It's called Legends of Sport. Very easy. You've got this logo. Very easy to find. You can scroll down. All the podcasts are on there. pick a subject, a person, whoever you want, and I'm sure you'll be entertained because I got to tell you, man, every single conversation I have had on the podcast has been amazing. Not because of me, because of the person on the other
Yep.
side. Every person has an incredibly inspiring story of where they all started. You asked me that about myself. Everybody has that story. You have that story, and we all can relate to that, and we all, can understand that. Jerry West had to start somewhere, right? And so did Kobe Bryant. So did Peter Guber, the great Peter Guber, who started with nothing. I mean, Peter Guber was like so poor as a kid, couldn't even afford a 50-cent ticket to get into Fenway Park where he grew up in Boston. He'd have
Wow.
to stand outside the Green Monster and wait for a home run to come over and listen to the game through the walls of Fenway. I mean, imagine, this is Peter Guber, owns the Dodgers, owns the Warriors, two major arenas and stadiums, was the head of Sony Pictures. I mean, I'm just giving you one example. So I love it. You can tell how passionate I am about these conversations. And then my photography also on Instagram, the easiest place to find it, at ADB Photo Inc. And we do a lot of cross sort of collabs with both platforms. So I'll give you an example. If I shot a Clipper game last night, the playoff game, or Kings playoff game, or Lakers, we might relate that back to a series that I had done in the past. Like the Lakers are playing Denver right now, right?
Yep.
So we go back in the past at Legends of Sport, and we look at when Kobe and Carmelo Anthony played against each other, which is a lot of fun. So I'll post photos from my game, and then on Legends of Sport, we'll go back in time and relate that. So it's a lot of cross sort of pollination, which is great, and more content's coming out all the time. And again, we tell people just keep in the back of your mind about this mural book, because it's going to be an incredible testament to the art that is out there celebrating how much love there is for Kobe and Gigi in the world. But that's pretty much in a nutshell where to find it.
Awesome. And for everyone listening, make sure to take advantage of that and go look at it. Because I was actually looking at his stuff before the show, and it's just really good. I mean, if you've read the book, that's how his pictures look. Like, this stuff is going to be good. And it's made for places like Instagram and YouTube for the eyes. It's very visually appealing. But I always ask one question to all of my guests. Really easy because it's about you. But what is one thing right now, whether in life or in business, that you are overcoming right now?
Bandwidth.
That's a great answer.
I'm not a spring chicken anymore, my friend. I used to pride myself in keeping a lot of balls in the air, having limitless energy, going, from one day to the next. Now I got to pace myself. I got to be conscious of my physical limitations. I can't shoot a game every single night like I used to. I used to go, if it was a weekend in LA during football season, when we had both the Raiders and the Rams were here 35 years ago. I mean, I literally would do 6-7 games in a weekend because you had Lakers, Clippers, Kings, USC, UCLA, Raiders, and Rams going on all at the same time, right? So you go from one game to the next, 2 games in a day. It was nuts. I could never do that again. I've cut my travel back almost to none now, which is a blessing because it sounds glamorous, but believe me, it's not. It's very, very grueling to do what I do on the road, and it's tough. It's also tough when you have kids. I have 3 grown kids, but I have 1 kid still in high school, and want to kind of be around a little bit more for her than I was for the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And bandwidth is something I have to be very conscious of. How much energy do I have that I can spend? How can I prioritize that energy? So it's a little humbling because I still think in my mind that I'm like 32 years old, but I'm not. Just go with that and understand that life has a way of teaching you when it's time to prioritize, but also when it's time to slow down a little bit.
Yeah. And that's a great answer and a great way to end the podcast. Andrew, thank you so much for being here. Thank you even just for that last piece with bandwidth, because even for people like me, I am still a spring chicken. But bandwidth is one of those things I don't think you ever have enough bandwidth, because there's a million things I want to do, but there's only certain things I should do. And spending time with my family. For certain people, it's going to church and volunteering. For people, whatever that thing is. Like making sure to prioritize your bandwidth.
Yeah.
because that unfortunately I've seen that with a lot of people who are unsuccessful is that they
Hmm.
take what they think is limitless bandwidth and then they
Hmm.
spread it out. They put an egg in a zillion baskets and
Yeah.
then they can never understand why they haven't been able to be successful. It's like, well, you just spread yourself too thin. So
Yeah.
just that one
Yeah.
piece. If you guys got nothing else, which if you got
Right.
nothing else, please leave me a comment because I would love to know how you got nothing else from this. But that last piece with just spreading yourself too thin
Yeah.
and figuring out what's a real priority for you, make sure to write that one down. But
Right.
Andrew,
For
again,
sure.
thank you so much for being here.
Stephen, thanks. Great talking to you, man. I really enjoyed it. And
Awesome.
best of luck to you too, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All
And for
right.
everyone listening, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.